Jake had always dreamed of being a singer. From the moment he first held a microphone at his high school talent show, he knew music was his calling. His voice wasn't perfect, but it was raw, emotional, and real. He poured his heart into every note, every lyric, believing that if he worked hard enough, the world would listen. But the world wasn't kind to dreamers. At 22, Jake moved to the city with nothing but a guitar, a notebook full of songs, and a head full of dreams. He played in dingy bars, open mic nights, and subway stations, his voice echoing off indifferent walls. People walked past, barely glancing his way. Some laughed. Others mocked. "You'll never make it," they said. "Get a real job." Jake kept going. He had to. Music was the only thing that made sense to him. He wrote songs about his struggles, his hopes, his fears. Each rejection, each sleepless night, became fuel for his art. He told himself it would all be worth it in the end. Then he met Emma. She was a photographer with a passion for capturing raw, unfiltered moments. She stumbled upon Jake performing in a park one evening, his voice cracking under the weight of his emotions. Emma was captivated. She introduced herself after the set, and they quickly became inseparable. She believed in him when no one else did. She reignited his motivation, his confidence. With Emma by his side, Jake's music evolved. His songs became deeper, more vulnerable. He started gaining traction, small gigs turned into bigger ones, and his audience began to grow. For the first time, Jake felt like he was on the verge of something great. But just as things were looking up, Marcus entered the picture. Marcus was a slick-talking manager who promised Jake the world. "I can make you a star," he said. "But you have to trust me." Desperate to take the next step, Jake signed on. At first, Marcus delivered. He booked Jake bigger shows, got his music on streaming platforms, and even landed him a spot on a popular talent show. But Marcus had his own agenda. He pushed Jake to change his sound, to make his music more marketable. The raw, emotional lyrics that had defined Jake's art were replaced with generic, radio-friendly lines. Jake hated it, but Marcus insisted it was the only way to succeed. "Trust me," Marcus said. "This is what the people want." Jake's relationship with Emma strained under the pressure. She hated seeing him lose himself, but Jake was too deep in Marcus's web to see it. "It's just temporary," he told her. "Once I make it, I'll go back to doing things my way." But making it never came. The talent show performance was a disaster. Jake's heart wasn't in it, and the audience could tell. The judges tore him apart, and the internet followed suit. Memes of his performance went viral, and Jake became a laughingstock overnight. Marcus dropped him immediately, leaving Jake to pick up the pieces alone. Devastated, Jake turned to Emma, but she was gone too. She couldn't watch him destroy himself anymore. "I believed in you," she said before leaving. "Not this version of you." Jake hit rock bottom. He stopped performing, stopped writing, stopped believing. He spent months in a fog of regret and self-loathing, wondering if any of it had been worth it. He replayed every decision, every mistake, in his mind. In the end, it didn't even matter. He'd given everything to his dream, and it had cost him everything in return. But one night, as he sat alone in his apartment, Jake picked up his guitar. He didn't know why. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was hope. He strummed a few chords, his fingers moving on their own. Then he started to sing. It wasn't polished or perfect. It wasn't for anyone else. It was just for him. As the song poured out, Jake realized something. He'd spent so long chasing success, he'd forgotten why he started making music in the first place. It wasn't for fame or recognition. It was for the joy of creating something real. Something honest. The road ahead was still uncertain. Jake didn't know if he'd ever make it, or if anyone would ever listen. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of something he thought he'd lost: hope. In the end, it didn't even matter what he'd achieved or lost. What mattered was that he was still here. Still singing. Still trying.